character represented in the infamous words of Superman, truth, justice, and the American way. Anybody remember that?
Yeah.
The two guys that created it were two Jewish men, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. Somewhere between 1938 and 2013, Superman got saved. In the new movie, and I won't give it away, but in the new movie, Man of Steel, there are more references and more video workings behind the scenes that show up about Superman and his comparison to Jesus Christ than in any other movie that has hit in the last. So if you're not a moviegoer, just go and see if you can pick out all the stuff, because I'm going to tell you a little bit about it for a minute. Man of Steel. He doesn't have a miraculous birth, but he does have a miraculous announcement. If you know anything about Superman's stories, Kal-El is the father of Jor-El. And he claims that his son, the birth of his son, will change the centuries. And the children on Krypton are genetically engineered to a predetermined purpose. So, Nora, Kal-El, or Jor-El, or Laura, the wife, can really claim legitimate parenthood of Superman. He's engineered to be the Man of Steel. The Man of Steel, when he comes into his own, is 33 years old. If that's not a subtle reference to Jesus,
Yes.
I don't know. He's also seen as not only the Man of Steel, but the man of superhuman passion. He's more willing to sacrifice himself to save the earth than anyone else on the planet. And not only will he save the earth that day, he will be the continual savior of the earth once he does the miraculous. Clark Kent, at one point in The Man of Steel, seeks advice for who he is to be from a priest. And there is one moment where in the whole thing he stands above earth in a spread form of a crucifixion. And at another point there is a cross behind it. Clark's adoptive father, Jonathan Kent, he's like Joseph of old, the adoptive dad of Jesus. He's a tradesman, Joseph Carpenter. Superman's ship, or manger, is even kept in the stable of the Kent's home. And then there's the Holy Trinity. Jor-El, Kal-El appear during the movie as ghosts to help their son and the miraculous saving of the world. And there is a line out of the movie where Jor-El sends his baby, Moses style, through the eons of time and space. And he looks to his wife and says, to them, he will be the God. Man of Steel. Well, this is Father's Day, everybody. And on the board out there is Superman versus Brave Man. Braveheart. I'm going to give you a line. I'm going to read scripture. So listen to this. There are plenty of sad hearts. There are plenty of troubled hearts. There are plenty of angry hearts. There are a few sacred hearts. And there are a host of unwilling hearts. But God calls us to develop something very different. He calls us to develop and be people known with brave hearts. And now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Soka in Judah. They pitched a camp. Saul, the king of the Israelites, assembled in camp in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. He was 9 feet tall plus. He had a bronze helmet on his head. He wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. On his leg he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer went ahead of him. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come to me and form a line to fight in battle? I'm not a Philistine, and you are not the servants of Saul. Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." The Philistine said, "This day I defy the ranks of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." And on hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and became terrified. They were with Saul, the men of Israel, and they were attempting to fight against the Philistines. Early in the morning, David left the flock of sheep and loaded up and set out, as Jesse his father had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to do its battle and taking up positions and shouting the war cry. David left the things with the keeper of the supplies and ran to the battle lines. Said hi to his brothers. "Hi, guys." As he was walking with him, Goliath, the Philistine, the champion from Gath, stepped out from the lines and shouted with unusual defiance, and David heard it. And when the Israelites saw the man, they ran from him in great fear. And David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. I am your servant. I will go and I will fight him." And the king said, "You are not able to go over against this Philistine and fight him. You're a boy, and he's been fighting men from his youth." And David said, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it. I struck it. I rescued the sheep. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair. I struck it and I killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies, not of Israel. He's come against God. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will also deliver me from the hand of the Philistine." And the king said to the little boy, "Go! The Lord be with you." Saul said, "Take my armor, put on the coat, take the helmet." David fastened the sword to his tunic and tried walking because he was not used to it. And he says, "I cannot go up in these things." Over the last 2 years in America, we've heard a lot about the immigration battle. Who should and who shouldn't be, and are we going to give amnesty and all of those things. And I'm not going to take sides this morning. I want to give you a story. There's a young man who is now 33 years old. His name is Jose Vargas. He did something tantamount to facing Goliath, and he being David. Jose Antonio Vargas, his name would sound like he is Hispanic in nature, but he is not. He is Filipino. When he was 7 years old, his family brought him from the Philippines to the United States. As a matter of fact, he made Seattle his home. He's been educated here. He is a Pulitzer Prize winner from here. But the roadblock to him becoming a U.S. citizen makes it virtually impossible for him to ever say, "I'm a citizen of the United States." He walks around all the time with the danger of being deported. He finally got so tired of the battle and hoping that the world would change that he gave up. And he came out and he wrote an article, and it was the front page cover in June, just 2 years ago, that began this whole Dream Act battle. All centered on him, because he came out and said, "Here's where I am, and here's who I am, and I'm not a U.S. citizen. I've been paying taxes, I've been doing all of those things, but come and get me." And he's been waiting for Homeland Security to come and get him ever since. They've never come. started with the New York Times, and it went on to become he and his story, the front cover of Time magazine. They still have the cover. Now, some of you would be angered by the story and say, deport. And others of you believe that maybe in his rebellious state, he's being brave. Some of you are looking with admiration, and some of you are saying, not only, no way, Jose, literally. But some of you are sitting and saying, I'm not sure I've got the guts to do that. This morning is about bravery for men and for women. Some people say, you know, you've got it just by the actions that you have, and other people say, I'll never have it and don't want it. See, I understand that there's a fine line between being stupid and being brave. Some people have a loud voice to proclaim how brave they really are, and in the words that they speak, they're like Goliath. Everybody runs in fear. He really wasn't brave. He was just bigger than everybody else. He was a bully. And some people show up in open rebellion. I'll go against Goliath. Now, the story of David and Goliath is one of the top 5 stories in all of the Bible that people most talk about and have encounter with. I mean, it's a boy against a 9-foot-plus tall guy. It's a munchkin. And because of the slingshot and the stones, we say, this kid was brave. Sometimes we distinguish between bravery and stupidity based solely on who wins. If David had lost that day, would some of us be questioning his mental health? Or would some of us be grieving over the apparent arrogance of a little boy that had the king believe, go ahead, if you want to fight, just do it? Some of you would think that the stick that he held when he had the sword would have been a better weapon to use than the slingshot in his hand. We would have given a different assessment of David had he lost. But because he won, he was brave. Some would have, had he died on the battlefield that day, said, well, I wonder what life would have been like if he'd have made it to his next birthday. The dawn of the 1900s, there was a gentleman by the name of Ernest Shackleton. He was one of the famed expeditioners of the late 1800s. He was known for his ability to take people and push them further and go further and further south, because he was one of the guys who had the quest in his life that he was going to go to the South Pole. 1901, he took the ship Discovery and almost made it. In the midst of extreme conditions and difficulty, they went further than anyone else, but didn't quite make it. In 1906, he took another group back on the ship called Nimrod. He was knighted when he came back to England after that one. He almost made it. In between time, one of the guys who went with him took another expedition and actually made it. 1914, he decides that he's going to make his 3rd trip on the ship called Endurance. And he's going to take that ship and he's going to cross the continent of Antarctica. He's going to go to the South Pole and go beyond. In early 1915, Endurance got trapped in ice, and 10 months later was crushed and sank. In April of 1916, the guys who had gotten off the ship decided that they were going to try to get out. So they began to pull their way across the frozen tundra. They pulled 3 small boats. They had lived for 10 months on the ice float. They made it to an island. Took 16 days. They crossed 807 miles of open ocean to reach South Georgia. And they made it to a whaling station. Now get this. Not one person who went with on the expedition died during the trip. They were all rescued. Now, here's how these guys made it into the group that went on the journey. Here's what they responded to. Shackleton put in the newspaper, in the London Times, an ad. It was an effort to recruit men. Here's what it says. Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. Shackleton writes in his notes that he was inundated with applications after that ran. Just that. He says, it was as if all of England wanted to join the expedition. Were these stupid people or really brave people?
Brave.
What were they trying to escape? Were they desperate for a job? See, bravery is a label that is always up for debate. What makes somebody do something as insane as getting on a wooden ship and going from England, going south, going across the equator, going down across Chile, and then going out into the straits and then having your ship crushed and living on ice for over a year and a half? What makes people do crazy things? What makes people rush to adventure? And some of us going, Saul, go ahead. What does it take to have a brave heart? And looking at Scripture, here's what I think it takes to have a brave heart. And the very first thing is, I think you need conviction. If you start pulling the heart apart of somebody that has bravery in them, it's conviction. Some of the things that David said would make me blush. Fought a bear, fought a lion, I'm going to go after Goliath too. But isn't that exactly what people with conviction do to the rest of us that make us blush? Any of you remember Howard Dean in the famous Dean scream? It happened after Dean had been crushed in the Iowa caucuses during the 2004 presidential race. And I'm not going to scream. I will just read it. He's lost. It is one of the most devastating political faux pas in recent history. And he takes the mic after he's lost. And he said, not only are we going to go to New Hampshire, Tom Harkin, we're going to go to South Carolina, and Oklahoma, and Arizona, and North Dakota, and New Mexico. And we're going to go to California, and Texas, and New York. We're going to go to South Dakota, and Oregon, and Washington, and Michigan. And then we're going to go to Washington, D.C., and we're going to take that White House back. Yeah! He was full of conviction and passion. There was one problem. Nobody else in the room was. Within days after the famous Dean scream, he was off the political map as a presidential contender. Can you imagine Saul believing in a little boy who's going to go against a 9-foot giant? But what the little boy possessed that became contagious was he possessed conviction. On the inside, he believed. The Philistine says, you come to me with a sword and a spear and a javelin. David says, you can have all of that, but what I have is a conviction to know that I come to you and will war against you in the name of the Lord. I asked my grandfather the other day what he wanted his grandson to possess. Grandfather said, I want my boy to be able to think on his own, to be able to stand against the crowd, and to withstand peer pressure. I said, then he wanted that conviction. And the grandfather said, yeah, I want my family to know my strong beliefs, and I want my strong beliefs to be able to get in them, and the only way that's going to happen is with conviction. I want my grandchildren to be compelled to be able to stand apart from the crowd and to be able to think on their own and act on their own. And the only way that's going to happen is with conviction. But bravery is more than conviction. It's confidence. Years ago, I used to sing a song, I've got confidence, God's going to see me through. No matter what the world may be, I know He's going to fix it for me because I've got confidence. 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 Confidence is the ability to know that what you have is more than enough. More than enough. That what you possess is more than enough to see the job through. Can you imagine being at the Daytona 500 or the Indianapolis Speedway, and you show up on your mountain bike, and Dale Earnhardt Jr. shows up with his 850 horsepower NASCAR sprint car, and he challenges you to a race, and you said, "Sure." And just then Jeff Gordon comes by and says, "Look, to make the playing field easier, I'm going to give you my car." No, I don't know many of us that can jump from a mountain bike to an 850 horsepower car and make the first turn. Your cars, how many horsepower do some of your cars have? 60 or 70? We're not talking about a Prius, sorry. Okay? Your average car, do you know what a horsepower is? Originally, it was that a mule could take 330 pounds in 1 minute and lift it 10 feet. And that's how they said that was 1 horsepower. So a horsepower is the amount of weight that a motor can move in a minute. Or another way to look at it, if you put 850 horses in line and snap the whip and said, "Go." And there were 330 pounds of weight on the backside. That's how far it would measure. I got my mountain bike. I'm going to beat Dale Earnhardt Jr. He doesn't drive the 88 car anymore. What's he drive?
Who cares?
Oh, those are fighting words. 850 horsepower, you got a mountain bike. Jeff Gordon says you can have his car. And you say, "No, I'm confident in my mountain bike that I can beat Earnhardt Jr. with his 850 horsepower."
Amen. Denny Hamlet.
Hey, Danny. The closest distance from point A to point B has always been a straight line.
David realized that the king's armor wasn't something he could fight with. And what he possessed was the best around. And what he possessed was skill, not strength. Skill, not size. He had more than enough to handle it in a slingshot on the side and 5 stones from a brook. Confidence. Confidence. See, God doesn't expect us to ever act from what we don't have, but what we already possess. He wants us to always do our best with what's on the inside, not worrying about what the world has on the outside. Because it's the combination of conviction and confidence in the heart of someone with a brave heart. Jesus stands in front of a hungry group. And the hungry group one day, at the end of a teaching session, he turns to the guys and says, "Time to feed them." And they go, "Yeah, right. McDonald's is closed. Burger King hasn't been built yet, and Domino's Pizza is too far away, and they won't make it in 30 minutes. They come back and say, "The best we can do is a couple of fish and some loaves of bread." And Jesus says that's more than enough. Not only did he have conviction, he had confidence. It was always going to be more than enough. It's more than enough. It's more than enough when you understand that God can use anything and anyone and anywhere at any time. Because God will always take what we have and make it more powerful than what we didn't have. More than enough. More than enough. More than enough. More than enough. It's conviction and it's confidence, and it's this unique thing called action, and I call it a channel for the cause. If David would have snuck home, it would have been okay. If David would have listened to, this is just a silly, silly boy, it would have been okay. If David would have surrendered when he got up there and said, you are too big, everyone would have said, it's okay. He could have gone back to the sea, and it would be okay. He could have walked away from the challenge, it would be okay. But he didn't, because he had conviction and confidence, and he had a channel for the cause. He took action. He didn't live up to what the naysayers thought. He went beyond their negative thoughts and said, God in me is more than enough. See, the greatest thing you can ever do is say, God is more than enough. It's not a good speech, and it's not one of those well-chosen singers. It's saying on the inside, yes, God, you are more than enough. It's more than enough with my kids. It's more than enough with my job. It's more than enough with my family. It's more than enough in the neighborhood. It's more than enough with my finances. God, I've got confidence. I've got conviction. I've got this channel. I'm going to believe that you can do something that I can't do with what I've got. More than enough. Now, I love Sunday naps, everybody. The reason I love Sunday naps is by the time I get to about 2 o'clock, I'm done with the week. I have raced all week long to get to Sunday morning. And when Sunday morning and everything is done at about 2 o'clock, I'm ready to have a 15 to a 60-minute nap. Don't call me, don't wake me, don't disturb me, don't throw a pillow at me, don't come over with a bucket of hot water, some cold shaving cream. Don't do any of that, because if you wake me up, you've just woken up an angry bear. I'm grumpy, I'm moody, and I'm brood. I get short-tempered, and sometimes I've been known to get just downright nasty. Yes. I know none of you fit in that category.
Even with M&Ms?
I love my nap. I'm entitled to my nap, aren't I? It's my time, it's not yours. Don't call me until 4:30 on Sunday. But I think that's kind of sometimes just because I like my nap. And I like my time, and I like me. Maybe sometimes I like it too much. Maybe sometimes it's because it gets in the middle of everything that I want to do. But I gotta have a nap. I've got to have my recovery. I've got to have my personal hospice. Having a brave heart sometimes comes because I deny what I want to do what he wants. One of the hardest things I have to do is to go to either the hospice center or go to a hospital or go to a home and try to surgically maneuver with doctors and medical staff and families on making end-of-life decisions. I was 21 years old, Gordon, when I made my very first one. A young guy in our church, I'd been there for 8 months as their youth pastor, and the senior pastor went away on a fishing trip. And the father and the son got into a fight over a beer bottle. And the dad took the beer bottle and broke it over his son's head. And before it was all said and done, the son had a brain aneurysm and died. They kept him on life support and called me in to make the final decision. I said, I'm not doing that. I'll be there, I'll help you, I'll pray with you. You've got to do that. See, the other part of the story is he spent more of his life in prison than he had out. He was 31 years old and he'd been in prison or behind in incarceration since he was 9 years old. And he'd been out. This was his shot. He'd been out. And he'd been clean and sober, and he'd come to the church, and we'd become friends, and I led him to the Lord. I was there, and you hear family. Some of the bravest words ever spoken are the words spoken at a bedside. And And somebody will look at a son, a daughter, a mother, father, a husband, a wife, and say, I love you. Didn't live long enough, but I loved you. Or letting you go today. But I'm going to see you again. And the bravest person in the room is always the person who speaks last. Because it's normally the mother or the father, or it's the husband or wife. They are without a doubt the bravest people I ever know. Some of you know what that is. You've been there. You get there because you finally settled in and you had a personal confrontation. You had to face what you never thought you would face. You had to live with what you never thought you could live with. And now you're going to live with what you never thought you could live without. It's the selfless act that comes about because you confronted who you were and who you weren't and said, what I've got is enough. And what you gave me is more than enough. You might be sitting here this morning thinking that it's ready to call it quits in your marriage. Maybe you're tired and exhausted and frustrated and you want to give up. You've gone over the options. You've gone over the results. I would like to ask you one question. Would you try one more option? Would you allow the anatomy of a brave heart to sink in for a minute? Maybe you want to take a shortcut at work. You have just had it with how the boss does it. You've had it by what you've been told, and you've got a better way. But when you exercise your right to do the better way and it falls all apart, then what are you going to do? Because pink slips are a lot this day. And you know the street is a tough place to find. Could I ask you to stop for a minute and take on the heart of a brave heart? And find a channel for your cause. Are you afraid of letting go? Are you afraid of giving up? Maybe you're just scared. You're filled with fear. You want somebody else to go in front of you to do it. I'm going to ask you to make a brave choice. Because here's what I know. There are plenty of sad hearts. And there are plenty of troubled hearts. There are plenty of angry hearts. There are plenty of sacred hearts. And there are plenty of unwilling hearts. But God this morning is calling us to develop the heart of a brave heart. Gracious God. Confidence, conviction. To channel cause. To be able to confront all that we aren't and come up with a brave heart choice. That what you have given us, what you have taught us, what we have practiced with is more than enough if you're with us. God, I ask this morning that you encourage some weak hearts and some sad hearts and some troubled hearts. Jesus, you said, let not your heart be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. Today we want to believe in you. We want to believe that you are with us to give us brave hearts. Father, I pray for men in this house today that they would get conviction. They would get the calling of your Spirit on them. That they would set aside who they aren't, but understand that what you've put on the inside of them is more than enough. Today, God, I want to choose you. Give you my heart. Give you my soul. I want to live for you and you alone. Every breath that I take, every moment I'm awake, have your way in me. Make me a man or a woman today of a brave heart. If that's your prayer, if anything that I've said this morning resounds in you, or maybe there's something this morning that you're lacking, and you'd say, hey, Pastor, before you go this morning, would you pray that I get courage, which is the final C that I left out. That I get some courage to stand up. I get some courage to believe. I get some courage to have some confidence. I get some courage to understand that God in me, Christ in me, more than a conqueror. Christ in me, hope of glory. Christ in me, more than enough. You just say, hey, Pastor, pray for me this morning. I need courage. Hands, all of hands, hands, hands. Men, women. I know it's Father's Day, but this is the message for all of us. So Father, sit with courageous people who aren't worried about if we're Scots our English. We're not worried about if we've got a big S on our chest. We aren't worried about where we came from. We just know that we're here and that we need confidence and conviction, a cause, and a confrontation. But at the heart of it all, we need courage, and that comes from you. So we need you today. Courageous people raised hands. So the God who is more than enough, give us courage. Give us courage. In Jesus' name. Amen. Happy Father's Day, everybody. Heart check for Father's Day. Love you. Oh, hey, two things, everybody. I'm sorry. Aaron, sorry. There is a gift for every man as you go out this morning. That's one. Two, there is also bread. We were blessed with bread. And there are several racks of bread. Is it out in the... Aaron, got bread. If you need bread, don't go home today without bread. We got bread, more bread. Love you all. Happy Father's Day.
send them your way, but that's not wrong. Okay. We'll do it.
All right, I'm gonna send it.
Do that.
Are you ready?
I will. Works out the right way, but it doesn't. It's something you can move on. So you can move on with your life.
Yep.
Kathy?